Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
If you like listening to the Paodcast, you can also check out Cyrus Says, hosted by the Cyrus Brocha. It's an irreverent podcast on current events, urban India, politics, sports, civic sense, traffic, kids, food, and everything that matters. Well, mostly.
You're listening to the Paodcast, presented by the Daily Pao.
This is Pranati
and Amit.
And we're from the dailypao.com, a Bombay-specific food and culture website, and this is our weekly podcast, the Paodcast. Now, on this episode, which is an installment of Metro Station, in which we talk about city news and history, we're going to be interviewing Atul Kumar, who runs the website artdecomumbai.com. So stay tuned for Metro Station.
Hi, I'm Amit Verma, the host of the weekly podcast, The Seen and the Unseen. In my show, I examine the seen effects and the unintended consequences of public policy and private action. I show how policies meant to help the poor often end up hurting the poor. I've done episodes so far on demonetization, GST, surgical strikes, immigration and MRP. And I will continue my forensic assault on the truth in the weeks to come.
Catch the show every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you prefer. Or visit seenunseen.in for all the latest updates.
Metro Station.
So this episode is an installment of Metro Station in which we talk about city news and history, and we have with us today Atul Kumar, who runs a website called Art Deco Mumbai. Hi, Atul.
Hi.
Hi. So Art Deco Mumbai, if, avid Instagrammers would be familiar with the Instagram handle Art Deco Mumbai. It started as an Instagram project in May 2016, and the feed is full of, as the name suggests, pictures of Art Deco buildings and Art Deco motifs from buildings around the city. And it's quite cool that you're actually doing this, because while there are lots of books on Art Deco in the city, there were very few online resources. And so I think this is just a great visual resource of Art Deco in the city. But you are not an architect. You're a finance professional. Tell us about your love for Art Deco, how you decided to start this.
Yeah, sure. Well, yes, I'm not an architect, and I'm glad we got that out of the way right up front, because it's invariably pops up towards the end, and they ask me, which school did you go to? And I say, oh, this is the tough one. But, so I found that there was a huge gap between the people who live in this city and the architecture that surrounds them, and that whole built heritage is so substantial, and their isolation from it is so complete. And we've done a lot through engaging with policymakers and stuff, which is all fine, but at the end of the day we said we got to engage our stakeholders and make them aware of this beautiful city which has such beautiful buildings, and within those buildings there's a story.
Yeah.
And so it's really positioned not to showcase architecture, but it's meant to invite you to look at very, very aesthetically pleasing and engaging pictures that will, draw you into the aesthetic of the building or the neighborhood.
Right.
And that's been the intent. And
so did you start by yourself? I mean, when you started the Instagram feed, was it you taking pictures on your phone of various buildings?
Yeah, it did. I was. And I still do.
And you still do?
Yeah, that's one thing I'm kind of really very particular about. And I believe that the whole engagement begins with a picture, right? Mm-hmm. So it draws the viewer in, whether it's on Twitter or it's on Instagram or Facebook or whatever medium we're using. And so it's got to be very captivating.
Okay.
And did you grow up in an Art Deco building? I mean, were you always surrounded by...
Grew up in an Art Deco neighborhood, yes.
Okay. Which
is Marine Drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and a bit of Churchgate.
So both areas, I mean, so
Yes.
were surrounded by this architectural style while growing up. And is that what sort of fueled your love for it over the years?
Not when I was growing up. I had no clue what was Art Deco. It's just, I think, in the last 15 years that I kind of discovered the style and started looking up and around. And that's when you start seeing and discovering.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've been engaging to put together the whole UNESCO nomination and in 2012. So that kind of took it to another level.
So now it's not just you taking pictures by yourself on your phone. You also have people who are volunteering with you. So we did a post on your website some weeks ago, and I remember that you mentioned that you typically have composed teams of a mass comm student and an architecture student, and you sent them out to document buildings.
Yes.
So what is the brief that you give them? When they're documenting a building, what are they looking for?
Well, it's quite an elaborate process because we're trying to document all the major neighborhoods across the city and create an inventory of the Art Deco neighborhood. It's never been done, or it's been done in isolation of smaller neighborhoods. So we run them through a whole initiation program because surprisingly, despite the fact that they're third and fourth year architecture students, they have no introduction to
Don't say that they don't know what Art Deco is.
Yeah, sad but true. And so we have a full day program, and then we follow it up with a walk, and then we give them a whole required readings and stuff. So we kind of bring them up to speed. And then we assign them neighborhoods, and those are all broken up into blocks, and they're all teamed up in pairs of a photographer and an architect. And then they go and do the field work. Okay. So that's the process.
So, I mean, what are they documenting? For example, like what do you ask them to shoot? Do you ask them to shoot specific features of the building? Like, for example, grill works, motifs, tiling, the entire building itself.
And are they given like a set of questions to ask when they go to these places?
Yeah, so they have a checklist.
Okay.
And basically the moment they identify the building as Deco, then the checklist kicks in because it's a fairly elaborate process of photo documenting the whole building. So it'll include just the front facade, and then it'll also include the lobby, features, elements, balconies, grills, as you said. Yeah. Even the lobbies are very Deco, the flooring.
Right.
And of course they have to deal with privacy issues, and people are not used to being photographed. And what's really refreshing is that people want to know why you're taking pictures of this balcony, and then they look at it from the camera's point of view or the architect's point of view, and they're delighted with their own balcony because they've never seen it or realized its beauty or its significance. And so they basically capture all that and go through a checklist.
Is access difficult?
Yeah.
It is?
Yep.
Okay.
But, thanks to powerful cameras, it's amazing what you can shoot from even across the road or from just the compound wall.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because they're basically going there and saying, let me inside your home, right? I mean, so how do their first point of interaction, is it often like the security guard of the building?
Yeah. We call them the Raja of the palace who doesn't know anything about the palace, the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
But we don't go into homes.
Okay.
So it's documenting the neighborhood. So you're documenting that particular building and all its external features, and which is fairly involved.
Yeah.
And then if you get lucky, then you can, walk into the building and take pictures of the elevator, the flooring, the lobby, the name boards. There's so many, the lighting fixtures.
And what are some of the things on their checklist? I mean, is it just a list of areas, or are there certain questions that they need to ask people if they can?
Yeah, so, for people, no. Because it's very hard to structure a format where you can have a set question, which will apply to everybody in every building. But for all the features, there's a whole checklist. So they will check for ziggurats. They will check for curved balconies. They'll check for streamlining. And they've been trained by us on how to identify those.
Yeah.
So that's what they do.
Okay. Well, one of my favorite pictures from your website is a picture of Court View. And the tiling is fantastic in that building because it really looks like a cubist painting.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are some of your favorite buildings? I mean, on your stretch itself, Marine Drive.
Marine Drive, I think Suna Mahal is very celebrated because it has Jazz by the Bay and it's on the corner of Marine Drive.
It's quite a dramatic building.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic building, beautifully maintained. And, gorgeous colors, striking.
Yeah.
And that's one. And then a building that nobody knows about, which is on Marine Drive, is Sex Area Building.
Right.
And, where the third generation Sex Area family still owns and maintains a gorgeous masterpiece.
Yeah.
And you have to just stop and look up, and everybody asks us, where is this building?
Exactly, because, we've spent our whole lives in the city and staring at these buildings as we pass by, but I cannot recall a Sex Area building. But I do remember we were just talking about this amazing picture that you posted on your Instagram feed of the Art Deco ceiling fixture, ceiling relief.
Yes.
In Sex Area Building.
Yes.
And that's not something that you see in a lot of Art Deco buildings.
Yes. And so beautifully and immaculately preserved.
Yeah.
Very rare. But you don't have to feel too bad, Pranati. I live 6 buildings away from Sex Area.
And you didn't know
and
about
I didn't
it.
know about it still. And the day I saw it, I was actually really upset with myself. I said, oh God, I've lived here now 17 years and I never saw this beauty for what it really is. So.
Well, now Art Deco, when you think about Art Deco in Bombay, you usually think about the Marine Drive stretch.
And you think about the theatres, you think about
you think about the
and
theatre.
Regal.
And you also think about, the buildings on Maharshi Karve Road and, facing the Oval.
Yes.
But there are lots of Art Deco buildings in Dadar and in Matunga. And these are also buildings that you're documenting. So tell us about some of the Dadar Matunga buildings. I mean, any particular favorites of yours? And are there any differences do you find between those buildings and the ones in South Bombay?
Yeah, well, the important thing is that it's always been Marine Drive and the Oval and Marine Line stretch that has been showcased and talked about but Dadar Matunga is a gorgeous area. There are some stunningly beautiful buildings, and not one. There's like a whole street, one building after the other, and likewise in Dadar, and likewise on Muhammad Ali Road and Chembur and other parts of the city. And one of our favorites is a building called Jitendra.
Okay.
And another one is Pie House. And I think what's different is that these buildings are slightly smaller, so they look more like homes than buildings.
Right.
And
They're
where are
like
they?
2 floors high or 3 floors high.
Wow.
Yeah.
These are the ones in Matunga.
Yes, just off King Circle.
Right.
Okay.
And very near Aurora Cinema and that whole area.
In Sion.
Yes. And, Sion, but going towards Matunga and then towards Hindu colony and then Parsi, Dadar Parsi colony, and 5 circles. 5 gardens, And we've reached out to people who live in those homes, and we've had conversations, and we've recorded oral histories, and it is so, great to see the sense of pride that they have in their architecture.
Yeah.
And how actually nobody's just tried to create a sense of a relationship between the built heritage and the neighborhood and the people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start talking about it and exploring it, it is so exciting and so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also sort of is a sort of call for them to preserve those buildings and make sure that they don't, aren't in danger of being redeveloped or anything like that.
Yes, absolutely right. That's a big one for us, because what we're saying is that if you enable the stakeholders and empower them and show them, right, then they take pride in it and they appreciate it. And when they see their pictures splashed on international forums of their buildings or their apartments, they are so proud. And I think it just reinvigorates them and reignites that whole desire to keep it all intact, because there is pressure from the builders and, like any other big city.
And it's actually quite amazing the amount of Art Deco there is in the city, aside from the pockets. Like Tardeo, for example, has so many Art Deco buildings. I mean, a lot of them perhaps won't stand up to the beauty of the ones in, Churchgate, but they're still sort of just very clean lines and attractive buildings.
Nautical motifs.
Yeah, nautical motifs.
Yes.
One of my favorite buildings in Tardeo, it's near Gamadia Colony, has this lovely little sailboat.
Yeah.
I think it's called Shireen Mansion. But, when you're looking at an Art Deco building, is there a feature that you're drawn to immediately? Like, for example, I really love balconies. And Art Deco buildings are known for their balconies. You have, the curvilinear ones. Like Pie House in, I think, Matunga.
Yes.
And then you have, and we've had a conversation about this, you have those winged balconies like Krishnabad and that amazing building in Kolaba, whose name you reminded me of, and I've forgotten again.
Yes, you're right.
But it has, they look like bat wings.
Yes.
So is there a feature that you're particularly drawn towards?
There are so many, and it's kind of hard to isolate any one, because each building kind of has a very defining style or look. Mm-hmm. But one of my favorites is Commonwealth Building, which is opposite Air India Building. Yeah. So when you look at Commonwealth Building and you look at those balconies, right, you realize why they're called locomotive balconies. And they're these sleek, long, gorgeously rounded balconies.
Right.
And you just look at them, and you look at 6 of them stacked up one after the other vertically. Mm. And each one looks like a locomotive engine.
Right.
And it is just, stunning in terms of its design. And then you look beyond that, and the other side doesn't have those balconies. It has right angles.
Oh, right.
And it's really nicely offset, in terms of design. And so it's features like that, which strike you about a particular building or create its style or its character.
Yeah. Well, I mean, are you trying to be a comprehensive catalogue of Art Deco buildings in Bombay, or are you sort of picking and choosing the buildings that you feature on the site?
No, we're not choosing. We're not being picky. For the whole documentation and inventory project, we're just saying we have supposedly the second largest collection in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When we researched that, we couldn't find anything to back up why we're not the largest.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't find the origination of the second largest.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into counting, and we said, okay, how many buildings does Miami have? And how many buildings does Chicago have? And how many are there in Chicago? And how many are in Bombay? Firstly, we were shocked Bombay doesn't even exist on the global map anywhere on Art Deco.
Really?
Oh, wow. But then it's almost like this common knowledge that we have the second largest number of buildings.
Yeah, it's common
it seems to be
knowledge,
the
where it's like
common sort of belief
really
without
limited.
Yeah,
You'll
no, but
be
in the sense that
surprised.
it's so often it's quoted, and it's quoted like everywhere, and so it's surprising that there actually is no official kind of record of this.
Yeah, so if you look up Art Deco in Bombay, and it pops up Wikipedia, right?
Yeah.
And if you look up Art Deco in New York or Miami or Napier, and you get the website of that city, you get articles written about it, you get conservation stories, and there is so much other stuff that comes up. So when I say showcase, it doesn't figure on the global map, is what I mean is that there's nothing talking about Bombay and its deco or celebrating it in the online world. And so our whole focus is really, one, to put it on that map, which has been going really well. And the other, of course, is to showcase it using this medium where a lot more people can access it than through a book.
Yeah.
But nobody knows about this second largest. And so we just said, let's go neighborhood by neighborhood and start documenting and see how many we come up with. And maybe we'll just have a huge surprise in there.
Do you have a rough estimate of how many you're looking at?
No, I wouldn't hazard a guess. That's not fair right now.
But are there have you completed any neighborhoods or not yet?
Yeah, we found 116 buildings just from Colaba to Marine Drive.
Really?
Yeah, so we're like saying, wow. So
I wonder how much Miami has. So how much?
It's potentially very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, one of the great things about your website, it also tells, you document all these residential buildings that not everybody necessarily has the opportunity to sort of see. But what about, there are plenty of public buildings that also have, most commonly people think about the cinemas, but what about some of the other sort of hidden gems that people can actually access?
Yeah. So there are many. And let me give you an example of Juhu. Nanavati Hospital, right?
Yeah.
Is an Art Deco beauty. And how many, Nanavati Hospital is so much a part of everybody's life, right?
Yeah.
Somebody has been there. Many generations were born there. So many have gone there for healthcare. And that building is a beauty. But if you ask anybody, name 1 or 2 Art Deco hospitals in the city, and I'm sure you'll draw blank 9 times out of 10. Beach Candy Hospital is
also
yeah. Not quite as stunning as Nanavati, but
right.
it is. And so, it's beyond the theatres, like you were saying earlier, which are the icons. But there are so many public, all the insurance buildings are, public buildings. So New India Assurance.
Which has those amazing reliefs.
Yeah. Stunning, gorgeous. And those, reliefs you talk about are so Bombay. They're Bombay Deco. You won't find that in any Deco anywhere in the world except in Bombay.
Yeah.
The amalgamation of Indian design and motifs into Art Deco.
Yeah.
Right.
Any sort of explanation as to why Art Deco became so big in Bombay as opposed to any other place in India?
I believe that it was driven by the cement industry.
Okay.
So RCC came through as a new form of construction material and style.
In the 1930s.
Yes, you're right. And basically the cement companies were pushing for architects to lift cement and, move away from this whole Victorian Gothic era where you were only building buildings with setting stone on stone. But you couldn't create a cantilevered balcony. You couldn't create a chhajja without supports and stuff. And plus, it coincided with the whole, Art Deco industrial design exhibition in Paris in 1925. And that was a huge push because it was the style, And obviously, all the Indian community wanted to adopt something modern and something that showcased their success, and so it got adopted in a huge way,
but not in any other parts of the country, surprisingly.
Connaught Place,
Chennai,
there I believe a lot of other towns in Maharashtra also.
Right.
Okay. But we're sticking to Bombay right now.
Yeah. No, but also you don't hear about those other cities that much, right? When you sort of you think about Art Deco, you automatically think about Bombay.
Perhaps Bombay just has more Art Deco buildings.
I think also compared to any other city in India and the world, I think Bombay is unprecedented.
Right.
In terms of sheer quantity and in terms of sheer density.
Right.
Where do you see one stretch of road with 35 buildings, consecutive buildings, all Art Deco? It's a style statement.
And your website, you do offer some historical material on Art Deco. Like I think there's an article on one of the great Art Deco architects of Bombay, G.B. Matre.
Yes.
And there was a generation, like G.B. Matre's generation of architects who emerged from J.J. School of Art and tried consciously to move away from the architectural style of their predecessors. And so he built a lot of these Art Deco buildings, isn't that right? Like
You're right.
on Marine Drive, for example.
You're right, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big one for us. What we're trying to do is, bring these iconic architects into the mainstream today, because G.B. Matre and then Master Sathe and Bhuta have probably built 30-40% of the Art Deco buildings in Bombay, and their design sense is incredible because they designed public buildings, they designed cinema theatres, they designed Rajab Mahal, they designed Shiv Shanti Bhavan at Oval, and they've designed buildings in the suburbs. They've done Mafatlal House, so the range and scope is incredible. And they've been lost in history and time and so we want to celebrate them too because they have contributed to the city in such a big way.
Cool. So that's it for this episode. Thanks, Atul, for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. And
do check out artdecomumbai.com.
Yes. And both the Instagram and the
website. Okay. Yes. And we'll be back next week. For more on what's happening in the city, read thedailypao.com. Also subscribe to our newsletter on the website. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're The Daily Pao. You can find new episodes of the podcast every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you prefer and on thedailypao.com.
एक्सक्यूज मी भैया, एक्सक्यूज मी.
बोलिए मैडम.
मेन्यू में क्या है?
मेन्यू में सीन अनसीन है, पॉडकास्ट है, ऑन कोर्स है, साइरस है, मेड इन इंडिया, रीडिस्कवरी प्रोजेक्ट, एम्पावरिंग सीरीज, सेक्स वेक्स है, IVM लाइक्स है, सिंप्लीफाइड है, कीपिंग इट क्वियर है, थिंग्स एंड डेस्टिनेशंस है, माय नेबर जकरबर्ग है और द फैन गराज है. आपको क्या चाहिए?
एक बार रिपीट कर देंगे क्या?
रिपीट नहीं करता हम. आप जाओ IVMpodcast.com पे और सुनो ये सब, या फिर डाउनलोड करो उनका ऐप. सब आपकी उंगलियों पे.